back to another episode of George on Sports with myself, your host, George Egertor. And today I'm really excited to say that we're joined by the Colts.com writer, JJ Stankevitz. JJ, how are you?
I'm great. Little hot out here in Westfield at Grand Park, but happy to be on with you. Happy to talk to some fans out in the UK.
Man, like I said, I'm really excited. And for those of you wondering where he actually is at the camp right now, where the Colts are partaking in a number of drills. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk all things Colts, clearly, one Colts fan to another. So that's what this episode is going to be all about. But I want to roll it back a little bit and talk about your background to start. So University of Missouri, where you studied journalism. Whilst you were there, you looked after the publications coordinator for the volleyball team. In 2010, you went on to join NBC Sports, which is obviously quite a big deal as a digital media intern, which obviously comes with a great amount of experience before moving on to Notre Dame, which are actually the college team that I follow. So that's great too.
All right.
As a baseball writer, before going back to NBC Sports to cover Chicago Bears, where you were there for some time, I believe.
Yeah.
And then made the switch and the great decision to come over and become the Colts writer. The official Colts.com writer. How do you sort of sum up that journey?
It's really interesting, George, because I knew I always wanted to write about sports from a young age, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go with it. I was always a big baseball fan here in the States, grew up a huge Chicago White Sox fan, always thought, yeah, hey, that's what I want to do. And then I kind of realized the time commitment that comes with covering baseball is really difficult. It's a lot of nights, it's a lot of weekends, it's a ton of travel. And I realized, all right, football, I think, is where I want to go. So I was lucky enough to intern at NBC Sports Chicago, which was then known as CSN Chicago, when I was in college at Mizzou. And then after that internship ended, I went back to school for a year, then got hired back at that same place at NBC Sports Chicago. And I worked there for 10 years, covering Notre Dame and then covering the Bears with a lot of baseball mixed in. But it's been an interesting journey to get to this point here in Indianapolis. I got laid off from that job. It was the 6th round of layoffs my old employer had. I finally got caught up in one. Unfortunately, a lesson in this business, at least here, is if you haven't been laid off, it's going to happen at some point and you probably will get laid off.
Yeah.
But the job at the Colts opened up. My wife is from here in Indianapolis. It was a logical move to move my family down here from Chicago, and as my second season covering the Colts, I couldn't be happier doing it. The team is great. The folks I work with in our content department are top-notch, outstanding, creative people. I'm lucky enough to be a part of it.
So on a note of the Colts, welcome to the team. Last season, so this is your second season with the Colts, so you would have seen what happened last season where we finished 9-8. Carson Wentz was the quarterback. You know, he was heavily lauded by Frank Reich because he kind of tried to bring him back to his glory days where he was with the Eagles. Didn't quite work out that way. The way we finished our season, we needed one win, as you well know, between the Raiders and the Jags, and we have this long-standing losses to the Jags where we just can't seem to beat them away from Indy. And lo and behold, we flame out to the Raiders and we completely just don't show up to the Jags and don't make the playoffs in the most horrific way that I can recall. And I will never live it down. I say it on every podcast. I just will never, ever live it down. Wentz clearly wasn't the answer. And I don't put it all on his shoulders because he did do some good things for us. But what are your thoughts on how last season panned out for us?
Yeah, it's interesting because you saw the talent on this team. I mean, 7 Pro Bowlers, the most of any team in the NFL last year. But when it came down to it, I think the lesson is that last year's Colts are about as far as you're going to see a team that is so heavily run-oriented go. Ultimately, it's really hard to have a Super Bowl caliber team that is so oriented on the run. And that is not a Jonathan Taylor problem. That's just the reality of how the end of the year teams are stacking the box, 8-9 guys, and Jonathan Taylor was effective and efficient, but it wasn't the kind of explosiveness that you saw late in the season. So I think that's kind of the lesson. It's why the Colts went out and they said, hey, Matt Ryan, we think we can improve our passing game to a point where, yes, we can still be a run-oriented offense, but we can at least be able to throw it when we need to and do that efficiently and effectively. So I think that's why you see the change from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. And then getting Matt Ryan in the building, George, I cannot tell you how many people have talked about the breath of fresh air it's been, just the vibe in the building that Matt Ryan brings to this 14 years of experience. We're hearing it from players like Ashton Doolin said yesterday out here, but like he'll see Matt Ryan in the hallway and Matt will stop him and quiz him on like, hey, all right, we're running this concept against this coverage. What are you doing? And like Matt Ryan, he's just on it all the time. And you can sense now that the team is on it all the time. And that's a really, really good thing right now.
So you mentioned Matt Ryan, and on that kind of segue, I want to talk about some of the off-season moves that we've made. And I, for one, couldn't be happier. I do think we could have, or potentially maybe brought in another wide receiver, but we will come to that. So Matt Ryan, 14-year vet, we know what he brings to the table, a leader, a winner amongst all things. Stephon Gilmore, which is a huge deal, bringing him in. And I know he's been paired with rookie Alec Pierce to help better his game. Jelani Woods, who's another big tight end. You can pair him with a guy like Murady Cox or Gigantor, as I like to call him. Alec Pierce, who's a really like a favorite of mine from the day we drafted him. I think he's a dark horse for the offensive rookie of the year. I know it's really early, but I can't say enough about Alec Pierce. Yannick, I mean, there are so many guys that we've brought in the offseason, which I personally feel can only, you add them to what we had last season, can only mean there is no reason why we don't make the playoffs and more. So on that note, looking at the defense, we've bolstered the defense. I know we've lost some guys. Autry went over to the Titans a couple of seasons ago. I've said we brought in Yannick, who I believe is top 5 in quarterback pressures, I think back to back in a number of continuous seasons. How has he looked?
Yannick has been awesome. It's the energy that he plays with and he practices with. Like his motor is just unrelenting out there. We're watching the one-on-one drills where they have this kind of red towel down, and the goal is the red towel is the quarterback, where you want to get by the offensive lineman and get to the quarterback, which is this red towel. And like Yannick doesn't stop until he gets to that towel, even if he quote unquote loses the rep. He's like, I'm still getting that towel, and it's just like stuff like that. You notice these little things. His get off is so fast that there have been some plays where it doesn't matter who the left tackle is. You could have Joe Thomas out there at left tackle and Yannick Ngakoue is getting around him. Yeah. I mean, it's been so impressive. And then on top of all of that, I just asked Frank Reich about this on a Wednesday, and he said Yannick's leadership has really stood out. That's the thing. What he puts on film, but the leadership aspect of it has been really, really a pleasant surprise for the Colts as they've got him into the building. That's a room that's got DeForest Buckner already, but among the defensive ends, it's a lot of young guys, Kwity Paye, Dio Odangbo, and having Yannick Ngakoue dropped in there to help those guys out is a huge boost for their careers as they go into year 2.
And then we move on to someone like Kenny Moore, who obviously wasn't practicing for a while due to contract issues, but is obviously back practicing. And you look at our core of DBs, and I know we lost Corey Willis to retirement, I think at the age of 26, which is completely fair enough. The game takes its toll on people, and sometimes they take different directions. That's completely fine. But you look at some of the guys that we have: Justin Blackman, who's healthy, Kenny Moore, a guy that I really love, Nick Ross as well, who I think is one of my deep sleepers. I think we're looking good. I mean, I love what I see. Isaiah Rodgers, who made a great play. I see all the highlights a couple of days ago. How do they look? How are they moving? Are things looking good? Are they looking fluid? Are they competing for reps?
Yep. That cornerback room and really the entire secondary looks really, really good, George. And I'll start kind of with Stephon Gilmore, because he today, during a 2-minute period, he was everywhere. And he's a guy who he's so smart. And he's into his 30s. Maybe he doesn't have the athletic traits he had when he was 24, 25, but that intelligence he has is second to none among cornerbacks. Alec Pierce was telling us the other day that he feels like Gilmore sometimes knows exactly what route he's going to run just based on the split. All right, you're lined up in this split. I know what route you're going to run before you even start running it. And that stuff from Gilmore, man, I mean, he is a student of the game and one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. But I had this conversation with Ron Miles, the Colts defensive backs coach, and he said with Gilmore, it's a lot of yes, coach. Yep, yes, coach. It's not a lot of, look, man, I was the defensive player of the year. I know what I'm doing. It's a lot of learning and processing. And you just love hearing that out of a guy like Stephon Gilmore. Kenny Moore II, we know what he can do. He's so important to any defense because you need your slot defender to be able to play both the pass and the run and be physical against the run, especially as you're getting these bigger body slots coming into vogue in the NFL. Kenny Moore II had 100 tackles last year. There is not a blocker who Kenny Moore II will not take on and will not shed to go make a play against a run play. So you feel really good about him there. And then the competition at the other cornerback spot between Isaiah Rodgers and Brandon Facyson has been really strong. Both those guys, I think, have had really strong camps. Fayson's a guy kind of flying under the radar a little bit. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about some under the radar signings, but he was one I was going to bring up. I guess we'll talk about him now. But this dude had double-digit pass breakups last year for the Raiders. He's only played in Gus Bradley's scheme. He's only played for Ron Miles when he's been on an active NFL roster. So he knows things, and he knows how to play in this system, whether it's man-match stuff, whether it's zone stuff. That's a really good asset for the Colts to have because at the very least, he's been kind of a translator for guys at times. I'm seeing him on the sideline during practice, demonstrating techniques and talking to guys and pulling guys aside and saying, hey, when they say this, it really means this. And having that guy, a player reinforcement is always so important when you're learning a new scheme. And then at safety, Julian Blackmon looks great. It's incredible that he's out there playing as fast as he is. About 8-9 months removed from a torn Achilles. Really impressive from him. And then Nick Cross, you mentioned him as one of your sleeper guys. This dude, he is playing really well in a really difficult position, kind of that strong safety in Gus Bradley's defense. There's a lot of communication that is placed on that position, but Nick Cross is picking it up really fast. He's physical, he's fast, someone who the Colts really believe in. I mean, they had a second-round grade on Nick Cross, and he was sticking up on their draft board like a sore thumb until they were finally able to go and make that trade with the Denver Broncos to go get pick number 96 and then draft Nick Cross. So you feel really good about the secondary. Maybe there'll be some growing pains just in terms of it being a new scheme, a new way of playing things in the back end than these guys are used to. But the talent is there. The willingness and intelligence is there. It's a really, really solid group.
I just can't stop smiling. Everything that I'm hearing is just making me really happy as a Colts fan. Like the fact that number one, you're actually there on the ground. Number two, all the reports that you're putting out and everything that I'm seeing on the socials is literally just going hand in hand with everything that you're saying. But on the note of sleepers and guys that maybe aren't on the radar, Ashton Julian is someone who I love. Right. So I saw what he did last season. I know he didn't get that much game time, but he's someone that Frank Reich has said, we want to get him involved more because he has the tools. And I've seen the big catch that he made, I think it was a couple of days ago, if not yesterday, where he basically mossed the guy. How much of an impact is Ashton Julian making in training camp?
I think it's been really cool, George, because for all these questions about the Colts wide receivers and, did they do enough in the offseason to add to it, you're seeing a guy like Ashton Julian really start to carve out a role. I mean, what Ashton can do that the Colts really value is he can dig guys out in the run game and is very willing to do that. He is someone who, as you're replacing Zach Pascal, he can go, he can be that kind of powerful guy in the slot who can go take on a linebacker or a safety and do enough for Jonathan Taylor or Nyheim Hines to get by them. And it's just a really neat thing to see his growth within this offense. We saw a little bit last year, that catch he had against Tampa on the deep ball, but he's got the speed, he's got the physicality, and he's got the intelligence that Frank Reich and everyone admires and wants in their wide receivers.
So having a look at the offense, because really, I mean, we know what Jonathan Taylor can do, and we've lost guys like Zach Pascal, Jack Doyle has retired. We've got guys back like Amali Cox, and we've now got the likes of hopefully Ashton Julian, who's going to carve out a new role for himself. I do believe, is it Michael Strahan is injured at the moment, so he's
Mike Strahan is injured. He's not participating right now. which, you want him to be out there. The Colts expect him back at some time before the end of camp. But that's definitely something to watch as you fill out kind of that back end of the receiver room.
Okay, so the offense as a whole, and then like you mentioned, I think what we kind of lacked was a kind of a leader and a good decision maker in quarterback, who we now have in Matt Ryan, someone that I'm a huge fan of. If I wasn't ever a Colts fan, I probably would have been a Falcons fan, just because I loved the setup they had there with Freeman and Julio Jones and Ryan and Gonzalez, etc., etc. But with the likes of the guys that we've brought in on the offense, and I haven't even started to talk about the running back room. I mean, I strongly believe we have the best running back room in the league. You look at Philip Lindsay, who's a 1,000-yard rusher, Tyson Williams, who didn't play too much for the Ravens, but has great talent and great potential. Mm-hmm. And then you can even talk about JT and Nyheim Hines. So number one, you can probably, and I think JT is aware of this, you can claw back some of the runs, because at the end of the day, we need him. Longevity is key in the game. Mm-hmm. And if it means that we can rope in some of these other running backs, and I'm all for it. But on the other side of the ball is we need to be able to throw the ball. If you have a guy like JT, play action is going to be quite important. You want to sell that so you can get, throw those balls down the field. We then have Reggie Wayne, who is obviously now coaching the wide receivers, which is, you can't ask for anything better. A guy like that who can coach up the likes of Alec Pierce and Paris Campbell. Campbell. So, I mean, I've rooted for this guy since the day he was drafted. I love the guy, and for whatever reason, he just can't stay healthy. Injuries have bugged him, plagued his career. We saw what he did with Wentz last season with that deep touchdown, and that's pretty much what you kind of have got in each of the last few seasons. Word on the curve is Paris Campbell, he's healthy, which is the main thing, and he's showing up and showing out. What does the offense look like to you?
It looks good. It looks, I think the best way to put it, George, is that it looks efficient and clean and crisp. Like, you can just feel it, that the way that it's operated with Matt Ryan at the helm, it feels different here. It's just the overall feel of how things are going is different in a really good way. You see the different ways that the Colts can use their pass catchers. You're seeing how Michael Pittman Jr. can develop a connection with Matt Ryan, but then how, he can move around all three receiver spots. If you want to get him into the slot as that big slot guy, he can do that. Nyheim Hines is having himself a tremendous camp. I'm writing about him on Colts.com on Thursday. Just a little couple of nuggets of what we've seen in practice and what he's been doing off to the side. And the stuff he's doing as a receiver. He told us that he wants to eclipse his career catch high watermark, which is 63. I think there's a pretty good chance he gets past that this year, as long as he can stay healthy. Paris Campbell, the stuff he does on those crossing routes and those deep overs, that's his bread and butter. He said, that's my bread and butter. That's Matt Ryan's bread and butter. If you look at some of the numbers for Paris, that Jaguars game from 2 years ago, the only game he played in 2020, 5 of his 6 receptions in that game came over the middle. Last year, Paris only had 3 catches in between the numbers all season. So that's an area where Paris can grow a little bit within this offense, again, if he can stay healthy. Again, it's just a lot of versatility. Like Drew Ogletree today out in practice made an unbelievable one-handed catch in some red zone work. Jelani Woods, you see the size and the athleticism is very much there. We know what Mo Alley Cox can do. We've seen some flashes from Kylan Granson. And then on top of all of this, the Colts have the best running back in the NFL. It's pretty cool to see the weapons here. And it's why Chris Ballard has said over and over again, he doesn't totally get the, this red line, like we got to go get this guy or that guy in free agency. Like he said, hey, let's be patient. Let's see how this plays out. Shoot, out here at Grand Park for the last 8 days, it's played out pretty dang well. And it's not sending red flags to me that, like, man, this team needs another wide receiver. I've been at training camps where you sit there a week in and you're like, I don't think this team has enough receiving talent. That is not this camp right now.
And that's music to my ears. Music to my ears, absolutely. And I've heard about Matt Ryan pushing the pace. Now, is this for him? Is this something that tends to happen at training camp to get back into the flow of things? Or is this something that because he's literally been in, I think he's had literally a full year of training camps if you tally them up. Yep. Is this something that he personally wants to bring to the team, or is this a normality for training camp?
So Frank Reich said that before training camp started, he and Matt Ryan had a conversation, and Frank said, Matt told him, hey, I want to push the pace in camp. And Frank said, all right, it's your camp. Let's go do it. And you've seen the efficiency and the tempo. It has a couple of benefits, George. One is it's getting guys conditioned pretty well. Like Stephon Gilmore was talking the other day about how when guys are getting lined up that fast, like you got to get lined up that fast and you got to go. There's not that much time to take a rest. And as you're trying to get into football shape at this type of year, that's a little benefit of it. But the other thing is that it's forcing guys to be mentally sharp at all times. And that then leads to there have not been a lot of mental mistakes during camp. I was just having this conversation with Danny Pinter after practice today, and he remarked to me, he's like, you're really not seeing a lot of MEs. And for a quarterback to come in his first year, getting to know everyone, that's a really good thing, that it's already this efficient and the Colts are getting really good work in. There's not a lot of time for guys to, kind of lollygag or, think about the last play. It's very much, let's get these things installed. Let's move it at a quick pace. Let's get our work in and let's do it at a high level. And again, like you just like, this is the sixth training camp I've covered. And I got to tell you, so far, this one it's felt so different in terms of how clean it's been and how efficient and crisp it's been. I know I talked about it earlier, but like, I can't emphasize that enough, that like, this just feels different in a really, really good way.
I love that. I mean, again, as a Colts fan, and the Colts aren't a high market team, both over there and especially in the UK. You will be very hard pushed to find a Colts fan over here. So again, this is all the things that I want to hear, bearing in mind, season's around the corner, and I, for one, just can't wait to get started. Aside from the guys that we've mentioned in terms of sleepers, is there anyone that you feel deserves a shout out that potentially has gone very well under the radar, that has been performing well or maybe overperformed?
That's a good question. Let me think about that a little bit, because we've talked about a lot of guys here.
Well, left tackle.
I think, the left tackle, Matt Pryor, is still getting kind of most of the reps there. Bernard Ryman has kind of been as expected. He's very athletic, very physical. He's got all the traits and the tools. He's got the work ethic. He's just a little raw in his technique right now. That's something that, again, to be expected for someone as young and as raw as he is. But Colts feel pretty confident about Matt Pryor. I don't think we give sometimes DeForest Buckner enough love. Buck today, man, at practice, he blew up like 6 or 7 plays where like there was one running play in 2 minutes where they tried to sneak a handoff to Nyheim Hines, and Buck was just like, nope, just like grab Nyheim, and he's like, nope, that play's not going to work. And I was talking to Nate Alley, our defensive line coach, and he said Buck always talks about how he likes to get freaky in the B gap, and how there aren't that many D tackles who can rush in the B gap like DeForest Buckner. He rattled off, Aaron Donald, Fletcher Cox, and then Buck is as those guys. And when you have a penetrator like Buck in the interior of a defense with Quiddy and Yannick on the outside, like, man, this D line, it could really be something else. I guess the other thing that we aren't talking about, and you sort of mentioned it, but Reggie Wayne, the impact he's having on these wide receivers, just like little things, like Michael Pittman Jr. said, because Reggie understands what it's like to be a player, it gives him this different kind of depth of understanding when he's coaching guys up. Before the Colts had a practice in the evening last Saturday, Reggie went up to Alec Pierce and he said, look, man, just like take a breath and relax. Because Reggie said, I had been there too as a rookie, as like a highly drafted rookie of the Colts, where you're trying to be perfect all the time. And he said, look, vets are going to screw up. You're going to screw up. Don't let it get to you. Just go out there and play. And since that moment, we've seen Alec Pierce's arrow kind of start really pointing up. And it's just like little things that Reggie can bring to that receiver room, I think, are really important.
Yeah, I mentioned that I'm a big fan of Alec Pierce, a huge fan. Someone that I think we've kind of needed to pair alongside Michael Pittman Jr., a guy who can go up and get it, but also has the big body and the speed as well. So before we kind of wrap things up, this is very early predictions. You've seen what you've seen from the Colts. You know about the AFC South and the Titans, the Houston Texans, the Jags. Where would you kind of predict the Colts to finish?
The expectation here has to be to win the AFC South. I mean, that's something, the Colts haven't done that since 2014. You got to win the South. You got to host a home playoff game. That's the first step. And I think you're hearing a lot about how it's not that anyone here thinks, man, the Titans got a lot worse because they traded AJ Brown, or boy, the Jaguars got a lot better this offseason. It's very much we're taking care of our business, focusing on ourselves. But the way this team is set up with Matt Ryan's leadership and then all the talent dispersed around the roster, you kind of think, why not us? Why not this team to go out and win the division? Why not this team to go out and make some noise in the playoffs? But the standard is going to have to be winning the division. That is number one here. The Colts have not done it. They've been close the last couple of years, but they've got to go out and actually do it before they can really start talking about, all right, we are a Super Bowl contender. We can really go make some noise. You got to win the division first.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, it speaks volumes in terms of what kind of organization and franchise the Colts are. Like I said, we're not a high market team, but we're not a team that, we're not always in the news. We're not always in the articles for the wrong reasons. We kind of just get on with our business and we show up. We just need to actually win the AFC South and take care of business. So JJ, I always ask all my guests towards the end of the show, what a typical day in the life looks like for you. So what would that be in your case?
So, well, let's do it out here at camp. So I'll wake up, I'll go get my twin boys. They're 2.5, get them ready to go to daycare, give them breakfast, get them out the door to their daycare. Then I'll head up here to Grand Park, usually get here around 9 o'clock, between 9 and 9:30, grab a little breakfast over at the cafe, and then sit down. And I usually try to knock out an article in the morning based on kind of what I got yesterday on the previous day's media availability. So it's an interesting life out here. The workspace we're at, this is a concession stand at Grand Park. I don't know how well you can totally see it, but
yeah,
we are at the top of a concession stand here at the Grand Park Sports Complex, our content team. So I'll kind of hang out up there, get some work done. Practice starts at noon, walk out to practice, go say hi to some players or some coaches, just front office people, just kind of, check in on how they're doing. And then you watch practice. You take detailed notes during practice. You always try to be as observant as possible about everything, whether that's on the field or off the field. The other day you see Nyheim Hines just catching pass after pass after pass from, some folks on the sideline. You watch Matt Ryan working with Alec Pierce on the sideline. But then when you're watching practice, I always try, I'm not as good as this as I would like to be, but you always try to watch like specific players and specific matchups. So today I was watching a lot of the tight ends. I was watching a lot of Drew Ogletree, and he had a really nice day out there. So after practice ends, you go over, you do media availability, talk to players and coaches for probably about 15-20 minutes. Then if I have any podcast or on-air duties to do, I'll go knock those out with Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, Lara Overton, our great on-air talent here, kind of knock those things out, and then come back to our little content area, get some lunch, transcribe all the audio that we got during interviews. Right off of that, write a camp notebook, get some stuff ready for tomorrow, and then about 5 o'clock head home. So it really is a kind of a true 9-to-5 job out here, but there aren't that many days off. We are off when the players are off, which is about once a week. So It's definitely a grind, but man, this is the most fun job in the world, getting to do this. I get to go talk about football and write about football for a living. It is an absolute blast. I am so lucky to do it, and I'm so lucky to do it for the Indianapolis Colts.
Oh man, it's a great job. It's a great job. That brings us to the end of the episode, JJ. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing that insight. Colts fans, that one was for you. I think I always ask that question because we always see the finished article, in particular in your case, the finished article with what people do, but we never really understand the insight and what they have to do in the background to get to that point. And I feel like the viewers always appreciate that kind of stuff.
Well, and it's a lot of kind of casual conversations turning into articles, essentially.
Right.
Like I'll be talking to a player off to the side, or a front office staffer off to the side, or just even another writer or media member, or some of our media relations team, and we're just kind of talking about football. And sometimes a light bulb kind of goes off of like, oh yeah, I should probably follow that story. I should probably go write about that. It's constant thought is the best way I've ever heard it put, is that being in this job, when you're constantly writing or talking about football, you're constantly thinking about how to do it. There are very little times where my mind is turned off during football season, and that's a good and a bad thing, I guess.
Yeah, no, I feel the same. I actually played for 11 years as a running back over here in the UK, as well as following the NFL. So my brain is always NFL. There's nothing else, just NFL. But Colts fans, viewers, I hope you appreciate that one. It's going to be up soon across all socials. All you need to do is follow George on Sports. JJ, it goes without saying, but where can people find you and your work?
You can find me on Colts.com. You can subscribe to the Colts Audio Network wherever you get your podcasts to hear me on that, especially on the official Colts podcast, which comes out every Tuesday here in the States. Maybe come out like the wee hours of Wednesday morning out there in the UK. And then you can follow me on Twitter at JJ Stankevitz. Just if don't totally hold it against me that in my bio I am a Manchester City fan, but I liked them before they were good. Okay, I liked them when it was like Roque de la Cruz and Roque Santa Cruz, excuse me, and Yaya Toure, and when they got Vincent Company, not when it was like.
You'll be forgiven. You'll be forgiven.
Thank you.
You'll be forgiven. It's great. It's great.
I know. I always have to have that disclaimer of no. I got into them before they won the FA Cup for the first, so yeah.
Yeah, JJ's not a glory hunter, guys. So don't attack him. Don't get in his DMs. He's not a glory hunter. But until next time, I've been your host, George Couture, and this is George on Sports. See you soon.